We have something going on.
Echo, echo.
So, okay, I'm Dr. Mitra Rashidian. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified sexologist at KMET 1490 AM ABC Radio News Live. And I'm here along with my very wonderful best friend, mentor of many, many years, business partners of many, many years, colleague. Uh, and that's all I can say right now. I don't have any more words to say. Dr. Robert Jaffe, who's also a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified hypnotherapist. And we're here to offer you programs about human sexuality, sexual healthcare, trauma, addictions, codependency, all impacting relationships. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. We are hopeful that this hour will be both entertaining and informative. We're going to be talking today about addictive behaviors and codependency. And we want everybody to feel comfortable to call us or to email us anytime during this hour. We are available to respond to you. Our number is 951-922-3532. So please give us a call, or you can find us on our page, KMET, right?
KMET Facebook Live.
Facebook Live.
You can also look at our Facebook, and also at Google business page, and as well as you can contact us through our private contact information as they are appearing on the screen. And in any way that you wish to contact us, we would like to encourage you to do so, because we're here to help you. We're here to answer your questions, and we are hopeful that we have all the answers for you. And if we don't, we will look for it. We promise that. And basically, your participation is really an essential part of this program, and we look forward to hearing from you. We want to know about your story, and we want to know also what is it that you're looking for from us, so that we can provide it to you and for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dr. Jaffe, you said that we are going to be talking about an aspect of codependency, which is addictive behaviors.
Yes, so we've talked a lot about codependency over the many months that we've been doing this radio show. And I believe, and many people in the field also believe, that codependency is the most undiagnosed form of addiction in the world. Certainly it is very, very prevalent throughout the United States. And so codependency basically grows out of what we would call the adult-child syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
The adult-child syndrome means that we've grown up to be adults. We're over 18, over 21, some of us over 50, 60, and beyond. And yet emotionally, we still have places inside of us that are much, much younger. So we are adults, and yet we still feel and act as though we were children in a lot of ways. And why is that? And one of the main reasons is because we grew up in a family where our feelings were not noticed, our feelings were not validated, our feelings were not seen as important. And so we began to not notice or validate or recognize and see our own feelings as important. And as a result of that, we lost our way, because why do we have emotions? There's many reasons why we have emotions, but one of the main reasons is so that we can understand ourselves and we can relate to other people.
Exactly. And along with not recognizing our feelings and emotions growing up, I think in some cases, gender of the person contributes to that.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we know that in so many cultures, female gender is not noticed and
Mm-hmm.
paid attention to as much as a male gender is paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So that by itself, getting attention is kind of can be in a category of bias.
Mm.
If you're a female, you get certain attention. If you're a male, you get certain attention.
Mm-hmm.
But those two attentions are sometimes, or they're not alike.
Yeah. So what I've observed is that, and although there may be truth in that in terms of boys being recognized as being more important than girls in many cases, I think my view is that codependency is an equal opportunity a disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, when we talk about codependency, we're talking about being able to understand what's going on inside of us and being able to articulate and state what's going on inside of us without apology, and recognizing that what we think and feel matters, and matters as much as what other people think and feel. In codependency, we sort of believe that the other person's thoughts and feelings are more important than ours. And if that's the case, then you have two people in a codependent relationship, each relying on the other person to tell that person how wonderful they are. And if they fail to do that, then they get upset with the other person.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and that's when I think the prime reason that codependency starts in childhood.
Yes. Yeah, it starts in childhood.
Between parent and a child, or parents and children.
Mm-hmm. So there are a number of definitions of codependency. I'm going to read you one definition, which comes out of the book that I've been quoting from throughout the months, which I kind of call the Bible of Codependency, which is called Codependency: Healing the Human Condition. It's by Charles Whitfield, MD. And he also wrote another book, a smaller book, but it's a very good book. It's called Healing the Child Within. And so the idea of codependency is that we have a child inside of us that hasn't been allowed to heal from earlier traumas. And also that child doesn't really know who he or she really is. So they're sort of lost in the world in terms of trying to figure out who they are. And so many authors have written different definitions on codependency. This definition is by Charles Whitfield. It's a sort of a long one, but I'm going to read it and then we'll kind of go over it and see if we can break it down and make sense of it. So he says that codependency is a multi-dimensional meaning that it involves our physicality, it involves our thoughts, our mentality, it involves our emotions, our emotionality, and it also involves our spirituality. And it's a condition that's manifested by any suffering and dysfunction that is associated with or due to focusing on the needs and behaviors of others. So that's part one of his definition. So in codependency, we focus on the needs and behaviors of others. And so if you're in a codependent relationship, let's say a husband and wife relationship, the husband is busy focusing on on how the wife is feeling, and the wife is busy focusing on the husband, how the husband is feeling, and they each take that as truth as to who they are. So if the wife gets angry at the husband and says you're no good, you don't bring in enough money, you're not good in bed, this and that, and the husband then takes those words in as truth about who he is.
And they start to defend themselves.
And then he defends himself and usually attacks back and says negative things about the wife. And now they're in an argument as to who's right and who's wrong about the things that they're saying. So, second part of what he says, it may be mild to severe, and most people have it. So he's saying here in this book, I want to say this book was published in the early 90s, and at that time he said that most of society is struggling with it, and now we're here going into 2022, and I think that hasn't changed too much.
No.
I would think that that's still true, that most people struggle with this.
And actually, we see more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Not only, nothing has changed about it. I think the only change is that with the combination of changes in societies overall, whether that's politics or economy or, technology or anything that we want to look at it, we see that codependency has actually increased.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's hard to imagine that it's increased, since it was all pretty ubiquitous before.
Exactly. Yes.
So. Yeah.
And in particular, at least among my clients, among my couples, that they come to see me, and in particular, again, among the younger generation of couples, I see more of that actually happening than at least my generation. Not that my generation didn't have codependency, of course, obviously, but among younger generation that I see, the couples that I see an profound increased level of codependency between them.
Okay. Continuing with the definition, it says it can mimic and be associated with and aggravate many physical, psychological, and spiritual conditions. So, mimic and be associated with, which means that codependency can be seen, it can manifest in physical health problems, and often does. So what other people think of us, it becomes our truth, and then if other people are not happy with us, then we can start feeling ill, physically ill, as well as emotionally ill. So that's what he's talking about here. It can mimic, be associated with, and aggravate many physical, psychological, and spiritual conditions.
Yes.
It develops from turning the responsibility for our life and happiness over to our ego.
So we just got the signal for our commercial break.
Okay.
Right? So let's start with our ego right after, we come back. How's that?
Absolutely, and please stay with us, and we're looking forward to continuing this discussion and also hearing from you. So
951-922-3532. Please call us.
See you soon.
Welcome back from our commercial break. This is Heart to Heart program at KMET 1490 AM, ABC News Radio Live. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here. Today we're talking about codependency, defining it, and going over several aspects of what codependency basically is and how it may impact our lives. And then we would like to invite you to please join us. Call us 951-922-3532. And also, if you believe somebody can benefit from our show, please do introduce our program to them, and we appreciate your contribution by contacting us, by telling us what you think and giving us feedback. Also, tell us what we can do for you. And please share your stories with us. Do you think you have any codependency happening with you or with somebody that you know of? We would like to hear those stories, because each story is only going to teach us something new. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I've been going over the definition of codependency as per Dr. Charles Whitfield. I'm going to repeat what I said. I'm not going to go into it because I did that in the last segment, but I'm just going to repeat it, and I'll take us to where we are in explaining the definition. He says it's a multidimensional physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual condition manifested by any suffering and dysfunction that is associated with or due to focusing on the needs and behaviors of others. It may be mild to severe, and most people have it. It can mimic, be associated with, and aggravate many physical, psychological, and spiritual conditions. And that's where we left off. And then the next part is, it develops from turning the responsibility for our life and happiness over to our ego, which is our false self, and to others.
Yes.
So the way that I look at ego, and you can chime in and tell me if you see it the same way or if you see it differently. Our ego is the part of us that runs us on a day-to-day basis. It attends to all the small tasks of our lives. And our ego is that part of us that values our physical survival above everything else.
And today we know emotional is a part of it.
Emotional is yeah, right. So the ego, although it values physical survival, because physical survival for many of us is not a day-to-day issue. A lot of us have physical survival sort of down pat. We have enough to eat, and I'm talking about most of us, not all of us, obviously, but we have enough to eat. We have shelter. We don't worry about where our next meal is coming from. So physical survival is handled, so that the ego then says, okay, well, if I don't have to worry about physical survival, I will start focusing on what I will call emotional survival, which equates to being right.
Right.
So being right to the ego means survival.
Yes.
So that's why people get into so many arguments over right and wrong, because it doesn't matter what the content of the argument is. The idea that I could be wrong threatens my survival, according to that ego part of us, according to that part of us whose sole job it is to make sure that we survive. So I have had couples, and maybe you can relate to this, but I have had couples that fight over the most nonsensical things.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I had a couple, they got into a big fight because he put something in the wrong trash bag. He put something that was supposed to be recycled into the bag that wasn't supposed to be recycled. And she commented, and he got defensive, and now they're off and running into a big verbal fight.
That's correct. I mean, I have couples that they fight over who said what. Somebody else said something, and then one got offended, and then the argument is that why the other person didn't come to rescue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And why somebody's sister, somebody's friend, somebody's mom, somebody's dad, somebody's neighbor, somebody's colleague said something that was not pleasing or appealing to the person who heard it.
Correct.
And they want their partner at any magnitude to jump in and defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what we're talking about, that we feel our happiness, we think somebody else needs to bring it to us.
We feel that our happiness is dependent upon other people's approval.
Yes.
And dependent upon our being right.
Right.
So if I say something and you disagree, to the ego, that feels like an affront. It feels like, oh, you're trying to make me wrong, and I can't be wrong because if I'm wrong, that threatens my survival.
Yes.
Now, what I'm saying this, it's interesting because when I'm talking to you, the general public, you're going to go, well, that sounds ridiculous. Of course, if I'm wrong, it doesn't threaten my survival. But what we're talking about is a deep, deep instinct for survival that is attributable to our vulnerability on this planet. We're living in bodies. These bodies can be injured. These bodies can be killed. And so survival has been our top priority since day one, since we've arrived on this planet.
And here's the interesting part. When we get to the part that we say something like this to a client that that it's difficult for them to see that what they're proposing or what they're anticipating or what they want belongs to them, and the other person really is not responsible to provide it, or how their misconceptions and misunderstanding of the situation or event makes them feel that the other person is at fault, and they have to comply with what they want. When we say that to them, the codependency is so deeply rooted in them that they don't even understand that what they're asking for really cannot even happen. Like, for example, when they blame each other for something, they are so deeply, immersed in being right, that they are not even able to see it, that they could not be right.
Right.
That what they want is not going to happen. And the other person really doesn't have to be the way that this person want the other person to be.
Right.
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 And it's so difficult for them to see that sometimes they think that myself as a therapist, I'm taking side of the other person. And I don't see their pain, or I don't understand it. And why are you siding with my partner instead of telling me I'm right? For example, I have had, a couple that I've been working with them, and since yesterday, the husband is calling me, and he's constantly complaining over something that the wife did or didn't do, right? And he's constantly asking me, am I right? I'm right. You're not saying I'm right. And I want to see you, and I'm right. And I want to tell her that she's wrong, and I'm right, and I'm right, and I'm right. He keeps doing that and keeps doing that. The fact that I couldn't see them right the way that he wanted me to see them. And I said, I'm booked and everything, but I give them another appointment. He thinks that I don't care, and I don't see his side, and I don't understand it, and I don't value it. And, so that's the depth of codependency. That's an aspect of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That they can't even see that they could be an epsilon, away from what they're believing, that that it's not all true, and it's only their perception of what they believe it is.
Yes. So to our ego self, being right equates to survival.
Yes.
And that's why you can understand why people are fighting so hard to be right.
To be right.
Is because in their mind it does equate. And yet if you were to say, oh, well, being right means that you're not going to die, they look at you like you're crazy.
You're crazy,
because
exactly.
because they don't understand that it's so deep rooted that that they're feeling it, but they're not thinking it.
Exactly.
They're not thinking I need to be right so that I don't die. All they're thinking of is I am right and I need to be right.
Yeah. So that's how they blame the other person. And once they don't get the approval that they're blaming is not right, they just it's a matter of life and death, and the depth of anxiety that they experience is just so profound.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear now in society, since we've had the Donald Trump as president, and since from 16 to 20, and there's been a breakdown in communication, and that's because of this issue of being right.
Yes.
that people believe that they are right, and if they're right, then the other person must be dead wrong.
Yes.
And so it isn't. Uh, we don't have the foundation of our Constitution, which was that each person can have a say, and that we can respectfully disagree and express our feelings as strongly as we want without having to denigrate the other person.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. With the change of societies, codependency has increased.
Absolutely.
And that's one example of it. Politics.
Yep. The last thing that Dr. Whitfield says about codependency, it is treatable and recovery is possible.
Absolutely.
So, but like anything else, how do you treat something and how do you work on recovery if you can't identify what it is that needs to be treated?
Right.
So that's Dr. Whitfield's latest definition of codependency. It's a pretty involved definition. And it's based on the idea, it's really based to a large extent on emotional immaturity. We use the phrase adult child, right? He wrote the other book, Healing the Child Within. That means that there's a child inside of us that needs healing. Healing from what? Healing from the immaturity that because they never got a chance to fully express how they felt and get validated for how they felt. They were always judged. They were always made to feel as if they didn't know and someone else knew better, usually the parent.
Right.
So when we feel as though somebody is judging us and somebody else knows better, we're usually on the defense. And what I've learned is that when we are defensive, it feels to the other person sitting across from us as though we are offending them. Our defense is perceived as an offense to the other person. Their defense is perceived as an offense to us. What is it that we are offending? We're offending the idea that we are right and they are wrong. We are right, they are wrong. No, they are right and we are wrong. No, we are right and they are wrong. And as
Well,
long
the belief is that somebody has to be right, somebody has to be wrong.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so what I say to my couples often is, it's more important for both of you to be right than to be close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why is that? Well, we just spent a little time talking about the ego. Well, if we're not involved in our ego and we're not defending ourselves and we're not trying to protect ourselves, then what other aspect of the human being is there? And so I think of it as the human is the ego part. That's the part that can live and die in these bodies. And then the being is the spiritual part.
Right.
The spirit is the energy inside of us. The energy inside of us, we now know that from Einstein, that energy is not created or destroyed, it simply changes form. So you have in the air water vapor, but we can maybe feel it as humidity, but we can't touch it, we can't see it, but it's there. It can start getting higher and higher, go into the sky. It can come up from the sun beating down on the ocean, and the water vapor goes up, and then it forms a cloud. So it's visual, right? But it's still not solid. But then as it congeals, it starts to rain. The rain is solid, but what is the rain? The rain is the water vapor, but it's in a different form. If you put cold in it, it becomes snow or sleet or ice. That's even more solid. It's the same thing, though. It's the energy that's transformed. That's what we are. We are all energy. Everything is energy. We now know nothing is actually solid at the subatomic particle. At the subatomic level, nothing is solid.
Yes.
Everything is energy. And we are energy. And what is our energy? Our energy is our spirit. And our spirit, because it just changes form and is not worried about death, our spirit is not interested in survival. So, what is our spirit interested in? Our spirit is interested in the things that we call spiritual and that we look up to in terms of the people that we have called avatars in the world. The people like the Mohammeds, the Jesus,
Moses.
Moses, all of these people were talking about love. They were talking about connection with other people. They were talking about kindness. They were talking about appreciation. They were talking about gratitude. These are the things that are the spiritual parts of us. And these are the parts that we look up to and we say, oh, this person jumped into the ocean to save another human being.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if they were coming from ego, the ego would say, there's no way because I might die. But so there's another part of them that's at work. That is the spirit. And the spirit says, my life is not worth having if I can't act in a way that saves this other person. That's our spiritual center. And so that part of us, when we access it, we are able then to have the love and the relationships in our life that we all want, but that we don't find ourselves able to do because we are locked into our ego self.
And we all have that spiritual side.
And we all have that spiritual
but,
side.
But our fear doesn't allow us to walk away from our ego. And therefore, we seldom are able to see that spiritual part of us, which is our loving part. And therefore, we suffer.
Correct.
We think we need somebody else.
So we'll talk more about this after our break. We just got notified. And we would love to hear from you. And anytime you want to call us during the next 20 minutes or so while we're still on air, our number is 951-922-3532, or you can go to our
private information.
Our KMET Facebook Live.
Facebook Live.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Welcome back from our commercial break. Dr. Mitra and Dr. Robert here at KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio Live. For those of you who just joining us, we're talking about codependency, defining it and how it manifests itself in our lives and what to do about it. And we would love to hear from you, 951-922-3532. And also you can contact us via our private information that they are appearing on the screen right now for you. So we thank you for giving us your hour. We know you have many choices to choose from, and we thank you for choosing us. So Dr. Robert Jaffe, we were talking about codependency and the ego functioning and the survival and the spiritual factor of it.
Right. So again, the ego is about survival, and the ego. The one euphemism for ego is EGO, edging God out. And a lot of people have trouble with the idea of God or the word God. But what we're really talking about when we talk about God with respect to our spirit and the energy of our spirit in codependency is that part of us which recognizes the sameness in all of us. The truth is that we are much more alike as a human species than we are different. I recognized this early in life because I watched a lot of science fiction. And I would notice that, when I was watching science fiction, they would have people who came down from other galaxies, other planets. They wouldn't look anything like us. They would have, 6 arms and 4 heads and 12 eyes.
Bigger brain.
And bigger brains, yeah. and they didn't look anything like us. And I always thought, oh, these are aliens. And then as I grew up, I started hearing the word alien more often, and it was confusing to me because I was thinking, well, wait a second, wait a minute, wait a second. As far as I know, those were all science fiction shows. No aliens have really visited us. And then I realized that people were using the word alien to talk about people from other countries or other
Yes.
cultures. And I thought, how strange, because those are people just like us, you know. Do they love their children any more than we love our children? You know, do they not need love and connection any more or less than we need love and connection? Do they not need healthy food any more or less than we need healthy food? You know, do they not procreate the same way that we do? Do they not want the same things in life that we do?
That's a very good analogy of it. For some reason, the aliens who come from outer space, the ones that we see in movie, they seem to be smarter, more advanced, and we want to learn from them. But the aliens who come from other countries, they're all backwards
That's right. That's
and
right.
retarded.
That's right. That's right.
I'm saying that because I'm one of those aliens myself,
You're one of
right?
the aliens.
And
Yeah.
I know of billions of other aliens who, that they came into the US and they left, or they're still here, or anyway. And, like you said, there must be a very good and a strong reason for somebody who wants to leave a nation behind and leave all that memories and experiences behind and move here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not because they are retarded, or it's not because they're backwards. It's not because they don't know what works or what doesn't work. As a matter of fact, because they know more, that's why they move to somewhere else to make it happen for them, because they know it's not going to happen for them in their own land, unfortunately. So it's such a, misconception that unfortunately I have experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It was very, very sad for me, during the Trump era to see you, we would go to places at airports and that you were always singled out.
Yeah.
Just because you're Persian.
Yeah, my name is not a common, John Smith or Nancy
Yeah,
Smith.
yeah, and it made me very sad because I've always thought of our country as being inclusive, and here we're acting as though there's us and there's them.
Them, yes.
Yeah.
And as long as there is them, that's different, and difference is dangerous.
Right, right. So,
thank you for saying that.
oh, you're welcome. Yeah. It was actually embarrassing for me that I was an American and watching you being treated like this because you're an American also.
Yes.
Yeah. So how do we recognize codependence? How can we identify codependence? So in this book that I've been using, Codependence: Healing the Human Condition, Dr. Whitfield says that codependence may be present in any one or a combination of the following ways. And one way is persistent stress-related or functional illness or complaints. So people who have problems with getting sick, people who have problems with their bodies on a persistent and consistent basis, may want to take a look at whether they struggle with codependent issues, meaning it's hard for me, if you're codependent, you'd be saying it's hard for me to not take in what other people say about me or how other people feel about me. So if I take it in, it may enter my body and cause me to lower my immune system, or it may get stuck in some part of my body that's not as strong as another part of my body. For example, it may get stuck in my lungs. The stress of how other people are looking at me may get stressed in my lungs, or may get stressed in my stomach or my back or my neck. And so we hold on to these things subconsciously. This is not, we're not doing it on purpose. We hold on to these things because of the stress of how we feel we're being viewed by other people. Um, the other piece of this is stress-related illness that is not responsive um, to, or only partially responsive to, conventional therapy. So if you go in and you are having physical problems and the doctor has a treatment for it, and they treat you, and the treatment is not successful at all or not fully successful, it can be the codependency underneath that isn't being addressed, so that your emotionality and your mentality keeps on recreating the places in your body where you're holding it, and you can end up feeling very stressed. Um, a third way that codependence could be identified is in the relapse of addictions or compulsions. So people who struggle with any kind of addiction, and there's so many addictions, anything can be an addiction if it is used in the service of changing your feeling state on a regular basis. Um, and so there can be healthier addictions. For example, people who are athletes can be addicted to doing what they do athletically, and it changes their feeling state. It may not be as destructive, and probably isn't as destructive as other kinds of addictions, such as drugs and alcohol. But it can be an addiction in that it keeps them from fully feeling and processing their emotions. So they're always active in order to avoid dealing with unpleasant emotions.
Yes. And yeah, that's one aspect of how addictions happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So what is the purpose of addictions? And codependency is classified as an addiction according to me, and according to Dr. Whitfield and others. What is the purpose of an addiction? The purpose of an addiction is to change our feeling state in order to make ourselves feel better. And when I say that, people listening to me can say, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? Oh, we always want to feel better, don't we? And I go, well, yeah, of course we always want to feel better. However, the issue is, what do we have to do in order to feel better? And addictions are a way of feeling better at the cost of not attending to the actual emotions that we are having about what's going on.
In other words, denying our pain.
Denial,
Yes.
Correct, denying our pain. So, for example, if my girlfriend breaks up with me and I'm very sad about it, and I don't want to be sad about it, and I start drinking alcohol, the alcohol numbs me to the sadness, changes my feeling state, and I'm not sad anymore, at least for the time that I'm drinking.
But that's actually, only to those that they can tolerate alcohol.
Well, that's for somebody who, yeah, we all have our favorite addictions,
Right.
let's say. So some people prefer alcohol. Some people, like myself, prefer marijuana. So I got addicted to marijuana. I would use marijuana all the time to change my feeling state, and that way I wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. Um, and of course, other drugs. There are legal drugs that you can use that change your feeling state. There's also what we call process addictions, and a process addiction would be gambling. So the reason you can use gambling as an addiction is because you get very excited when you're gambling, and when you're excited, you stimulate internal systems which change your brain chemistry. So I say, okay, if you're an addict, if you're a gambling addict, you want to win. You're conscious of wanting to win, and so if you're gambling and you throw the dice and you win, you go, I won. It's it's that part of it that gives us the rush, the
Yes.
feeling state, right? However, you can also look at it on a flip side. If I throw the dice and it comes up craps and I lose, I'm still going to say,
I lost.
It's
Yes.
still the same. So, although I feel the letdown and it doesn't feel as good, it still gives me the same adrenaline rush, even though I'm losing. So that's why when people are gambling, they can throw their money away and keep gambling even though they're losing because they're still getting the same adrenaline rush and it's still
Yeah.
changing their feeling state.
Yeah. The money runs out, but not the adrenaline rush.
Right, right. And the money can run out. Of course, you have people who are multimillionaires and they gamble, as though they're multimillionaires, and if they're making millions and millions, then they just keep losing millions and millions, at the gambling table.
Yes. But the process is the same for
The
everybody.
process is the same.
Yes.
There's been some talk recently about whether sex is actually an addiction or sex is a compulsion. And from my point of view, compulsions and addictions are first cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And so a compulsion is something that you do in order to change your feeling state. Addiction is the same thing. So we're sort of using the words compulsions instead of addictions, but to me they're very similar, if not the same. And so if somebody has a sexual compulsion, that means they're using the chemicals in their body that cause us to get sexually aroused and sexually excited in order to feel better on a consistent basis and change our feeling state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so basically that's what codependency is. It's about changing your feeling state. It's an addiction. And the other thing that codependency creates is difficulties in relationships, starting with a relationship with ourself, and then moving into relationships with others, and then our relationship with our higher power, if we have a higher power.
If you have one,
Yeah.
When codependency happens in relationship, this is how I see it, that whatever caused me to be unhappy or whatever I wanted and didn't happen, and I still have an unconscious desire to have it and to feel satisfied about it, becomes a paradigm in my adulthood relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I will hold my partner responsible to make me happy by providing what I want,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the context, depending on the story, depending on the situation that happens.
Yeah.
It is as though my partner becomes my mom, becomes my dad, becomes everything in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and this person now is responsible to provide me with what I didn't get.
Right. And so, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a lot of what we see as
Mm-hmm.
therapists with our clients who are codependent, is that they're looking to their partners to meet the unmet needs that
Right.
they didn't get when they were children.
Right.
And of course, they're doing this subconsciously.
Yes.
If you said to them, "Oh, well, your partner has become the good mother to you, or your partner has become the good father," there are actually clients who will go, "Oh, yeah, that's accurate," and then there are clients who will say, "Well, what do you mean? I don't see them as my mother or father, right?"
Yes.
But they're talking from the conscious level.
Right.
So the next time we talk about this, I'd like us to talk more about the unconscious and the subconscious.
I think that's a good idea.
Because
yes.
that's a lot of what we've been talking about today, is the subconscious and how we act.
Exactly.
So
we just got our notice that our program is about to end in a few seconds. We want to thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next week so that we can continue with more in-depth insight about what codependency is and how it runs our lives. And thank you, Dr. Robert Jaffe.
Thank you.
And until next week, don't forget that all we need is love.
All you need is love.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.